Hello, my name is Aaron Scott Lacy with a simple lesson. Today we're going to explore the shag. The shag is a really fun, versatile haircut that works on a variety of textures. It is very playful. It's basically a short, layered haircut. It's a haircut that actually conforms to our natural build. It's breaking away from the conformity of presenting a definite line. Consider what a bob is. A bob is something that lives above the shoulders and has a very distinct line that's either pushing longer towards the front, more leveled out neutral, or it's pushing longer towards the back. The shag is something that breaks the mold of that, and it actually follows what happens naturally within our hairline. So if we take a look at how we are designed, we've got less hair through the front, more hair towards the back. We've got this steep drop off right behind the ear at the mastoid. The shag basically is situated so that it's layered and that it's gradually getting slightly longer to the back. The close relative of a shag is actually a mullet, and it follows the same type of pattern to where instead of getting slightly longer towards the back, there's a steep, dramatic drop off where it gets really longer towards the back. And so what we're after today is just to create a really nice fluid shape that hugs her natural contour and promotes volume and playfulness and softness. There is so much inspiration from 70s shapes and styles right now, to where you see lots of curtain effect and Farrah Fawcett fringe and framing and face framing layers. And I think the shag encourages all of these types of dynamics that we see within a shape and style that we find appealing. The shag is geared towards someone that just wants to shake their hair out, go like this, and then be on their way. So there's a ton of emphasis on presenting a suitable shape so that the wearer has minimal effort that they have to do on styling. My impression of the head of hair that's in front of me right now is that we have a medium to tightly wound curl, and there's a low density. So this is actually perfectly suited for a shag, because by taking this length and condensing it, it actually strengthens the texture. It makes it appear more voluminous, thicker, it's more definite. The longer this hair becomes, the more stringy it can start to appear, the more challenging it becomes to actually preserve that sense of fullness down at the bottom. I try to always be very real with my clients, and I situate them directly in front of a mirror. That way they can see what I see, and we can talk plainly about it, and we can start to talk about directions we could potentially go. Exploration within haircutting is so much fun because some things work and some things don't, but as long as you put yourself in a position to try and aim to do something slightly different within your clients, it gives them the opportunity to explore with you. So I hope you enjoy some of my insight on the shag, and what I want to show is just a really simplified technical breakdown of one of the most popular haircuts right now that works virtually on all hair textures. So for this process, I really need to prioritize the important focal points of this shape. The sooner I can get her to actually feel comfortable with the direction that we're going, the more it starts to ease each of our tension. So we're gonna do something different. We're making a change, which can be scary. Change can be scary and exciting at the same time, and so I always want to present something to my guests that they like right off the bat. And so what I'm describing to you right now is that we're not going to start in the back and build our shape from the bottom up. We're actually going to start from the front and work our way backwards, because to me it's really important for her to actually see something that she loves immediately. Let's also talk about why I'm working her hair texture in its natural state. Imagine that this isn't a doll head and that this hair isn't perfectly permed to where every single curl is situated in the exact same spot. Any head of hair, whether it's wavy, curly, coily, is going to have variation within the curl pattern on the head. Choosing to work with this head of hair in its natural state comes from a desire to aim for balance instead of perfect symmetry. On any given head of hair, you're going to see a variety of things happening with the texture. Some areas might be more tightly wound, some areas might be looser. The top might be more affected by the elements, which actually lets it sit longer than what's protected underneath it. So if we were to attempt to create perfect symmetry to where everything matched up, imagine 90 degrees out from the entire head, a convex technique, and we stretched everything out. Well, when that hair actually dries, the areas that are more tightly wound will shrink more and they'll live closer to the head. So then you end up with that asymmetry, and it doesn't really work for the wearer. This is why I would never take a head of hair like this and press it and try to put perfect lines in it, because she doesn't wear it that way. She's gonna rock it like this in its natural state. So the perfect line only lives within the parameters of when you are manipulating it and trying to put that perfect line to it. We actually want to see a little bit of imperfection, because the beauty of texture is that it expands. And when everything is coming and hitting that same line, this is where you start to get a mushroom, a triangle, to where you start to see shelves within the shape. Instead of seeing shelves, instead of seeing this perfect line, I actually want the lengths to be slightly different from one another. That way it gives each curl the individual spot for it to do its own thing and expand. So we will start in the front. And a clear distinction I like to make about a shag is that a shag technically has a fringe. It has something that lives in the front. And if you consider what a fringe or a bang section typically is within a shape and style, is that a fringe is a disconnected panel that doesn't perfectly connect to what lives behind it. In a shag, it does. So what lives directly behind the fringe that we place is actually going to flow. So you're going to see this natural progression that what lives behind it perfectly complements it, to where we don't see such a significant length discrepancy. Now the shag is going to be a neutral haircut. We're not going to work with a deep side parting. Basically things are just going to come forward like a sunflower. And where I have the doll head positioned, what is at the top of the crown is living forward, and what's behind the top of the crown is living backwards. That way we're positioning this hair intentionally to where we actually want it to live and be positioned when she wears it. We have several options in how we handle the hair when we're working with it. First off, I want to look and see at this root area how her curls are naturally coming together without us involved. The moment we get involved and we start touching, we're placing tension on the hair. So it's really good to pay attention to how much tension you're actually placing on the hair, because since she has all of the bends and the waves, anytime we're touching this, we're affecting how it lives naturally. So I like to make the comparison of a rubber band. And when you have a rubber band in your hand, the further you start to pull it back, the moment you release it, the further distance it travels. Let's talk about 0 degrees, natural fall, no tension. If I were just to come through and cut a line without any extra manipulation, I don't think it's a good concept for the space that we're in right now. And what can happen is if you are afraid to touch the hair, if you're not willing to really get in there and manipulate it, what you'll end up with is that line that you've put in there that is seemingly perfect isn't actually perfect, because there are loose hairs living within these sections. You've got all these individual hairs that are coming together to form a wave, but there will always be loose bits. So after you actually cut it and you washed it and you styled it, you might find random loose bits, and that's not really a good look. That's not what we're after. The safe play is to actually grab the hair and place a minimal amount of tension so that you can become comfortable with how it responds, with how it jumps. And I'm working from the center. My section size, generally I don't want it to be any larger than a 1/2 inch. Right now I'm borderline, I'm grabbing a bit too much hair, because when you bring this all to the center, you're actually over directing these corner areas into the center, which means it will actually fan out. Curls are generally going to group together about every 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. And the reason why that is because we're on this rounded surface called head shape. And that head shape starts to turn pretty dramatically. So all those curls will naturally come together at a point. So I feel good about the adjustment that I made. You can see this curl grouping together naturally. And within my hand, I'm going to hold this hair, and I'm going to hold it with actually a little bit of tension. See how I'm stretching this hair? Even though I'm working with it dry, once I cut it, it's actually going to jump up. I need to determine where I'm aiming. I also need to consider the angle of my blade and how I'm working this into the hair. The more I angle this, the more it will encourage something to happen within this dimension. The more I just come at it neutral, the less likelihood I have to create that type of dynamic and that curvature. So I'm holding this with a good amount of tension, I'm angling my blade, and I'm opening and closing my blade as I go. I'm not just doing one singular chop. And since I'm cutting above where my tension point is, it allows the hair to actually jump slightly as I'm working with it. If I hold that hair down and I'm just pinching it and cutting below, things stay totally intact because the tension point is right where my fingers are meeting. So after I make my first cut, I'll move things around a little bit and I'll see what it's doing, where it's living. Something you really have to consider with the hairline is that it's jumpier. Even if someone doesn't have the cowlicks through the front, your hair is different. It's more fragile, it's jumpier, it does different things through the hairline. So if you're worried about what the actual reaction is going to be, start longer, work with it, style the hair, see where it ends up. Because even though I've cut it in this position, once I style her hair, I can anticipate it's going to jump a little more and it's going to live a little higher up than where it is at this moment. I've explained to her that even though it's living in this position, when she wears it, it's actually going to live a little higher up for her so that she can see. And now I need to determine what I want to see with the line. So am I going for neutral, half moon, or rounded up? I would opt for neutral. That way we don't end up with a bunch of excess hair in the corners. My body position is going to keep me on track because I'm starting from the top and I'm working in like this. If I stand on this side, I'll be working from the top and coming inwards, which actually puts me in a slightly uncomfortable, awkward position. When I work this section, I have to be careful not to over direct this hair, and I'm working in a spot that's slightly awkward because I'm working away from myself. So this particular section might take a little more work for me to get it dialed in. Your best indicator of where you're at is to actually look at something at eye level. And that's going to tell you whether or not something is balanced. So after I made those initial cuts, I came through with the points of my scissors and softened the line. We want to encourage something that moves, something that isn't overly stuck in place. And I think that that's a great starting point. This is where I would check in with my client and ask, how does that feel? Do you like where that's sitting? And as I move up the head, I'm going to be working towards the apex. So the apex is going to be the highest point horizontally and the highest point vertically. I want to establish what would normally be the fringe section within a haircut. And so once again, coming back to the root area and looking at where that hair is naturally separating. I want you to be able to use this as a general template on how to approach a shag, but to also use good judgment based on what you see on a particular head of hair. Look at how those curls are grouping together. And I will once again start from the center, and I need to consider how much weight I'm going to place on the line versus how much I'm going to work the internal dimension to let it start to lift and live up through here. I want it to be that sunflower type of look. So holding the hair, tugging on it, stretching it, and opening and closing my blade, I can see how this hair isn't coming all the way down to the bottom. So we're already starting to create this type of dynamic through the interior. The higher I bring this hair, the lighter it becomes towards the top. So if I wasn't satisfied with where this was positioned and I already wanted it to start to live up through here, I would actually bring this hair and cut it up here instead of down here. Now in this moment, I'm working purely visually. I'm not grabbing the underneath and bringing it up and joining things, because I like to have a certain sense of flexibility and flow to what's happening right here in this moment. The difference is if I grabbed what's happening underneath here and tried to use that as a guide, I'm pretty married to that guide. And movement is key. Continually move the hair around and see what it does, see where it lives. She's not a statue. She's not just going to sit in one position all day long. She's going to go to the gym, she's going to go to the grocery store, she's going to go to work. Once again, coming through with the points of my scissors, using my mirror to see whether or not we're creating balance through the inside. And another reason why I'm not so tied and married to the guide underneath is that I want each curl to live in a slightly different spot. And I've reached the apex. And this is where I have the opportunity to really start to create expansion throughout the inside. I've established what is living through the front, and we have a relatively heavy fringe with a little bit of bevel on the edge. Now what I can do is actually grab what's living directly underneath and work that as a guide. So as I pinch this hair, I can see what's living. And the more I raise this hair, the lighter it becomes. The more it's going to expand. And once again, I'm opening and closing my blades so that it encourages slightly different lengths throughout the inside. And this is where you can really begin to have some fun through this process, because you can start to flow throughout it using what I've already cut through the underneath and working my way out. I'm grabbing a little bit from the underneath. And so once again, my process is to utilize tension, to utilize elevation. We're lifting the hair so that it can become lighter through the top. If I were to just freehand and try to etch this whole thing out, there'd be too many loose hairs floating around. We want to create something that's definite yet soft, which is why I'm actually sliding through it. And then once again, coming at eye level, seeing how far it's tapering down in those corners. Sometimes this is like a bit of insurance. So I would much rather be in this territory than this territory. So now that I've worked that fringe area, you can see we've come clearly from the apex down to each recession point. But what lives on top of it, beside it, needs to all cohesively flow. So instead of focusing on the sides first, I'm gonna finish out the top. And the top is going to work its way from the recession along the parietal ridge towards the crown. So in order to stay organized, you can use a clip like this. Now, something to consider with a natural texture that expands, you don't always need to take it short in order to encourage volume. A lot of times it's what you actually leave behind that gives it the ability to be able to be stretched and pulled out and manipulated in a way that creates that voluminous type of shape. So from the apex, we're going to use what's happening at the apex as a guide to work the rest of the top. And we'll take horizontal sections, continuing to use what's already been cut, and I want it to get gradually longer towards the crown area. If it gets shorter towards the crown area, it's going to leave the crown feeling depressed. It won't give it the opportunity to really expand. So we're bringing this hair forward. If you notice, I'm actually turning the hair as I work with it. It's encouraging the dynamic of the hair. The hair has all these bends and curves. And so by turning it, I'm really ensuring that I'm grabbing every hair within the section and placing tension on it. And now I'll jump over, gather my section, and once again, using what's already been cut. And you see how the angle of my blade is letting the hair get gradually longer towards the back. This is visual, yes, but if you need to cross-check, if you have that urge and you want to see how your lengths are matching up, come through the opposite way and lay this hair on your hands or look at it against a white background so that you can see what the lengths are looking like. Do they look perfectly matched up? Are you seeing one side that's significantly longer, or are they relatively close to one another? If you want to encourage a bit more separation too, go ahead and use the tips of your scissors to point into. What I'm not going to do is lift this up and then just start shredding through the insides. What we would call thinning or removing extra weight. Because what that's going to do is it's going to send this hair into a frenzy. And all those hairs that were naturally coming together and locking together through the ends, you're going to see all these little prongs sticking out. All I would like to do is encourage a little bit of separation at these ends. Freehanding, once I've established the shape and technique, is okay in my book, because what that's going to do is it's going to help offer a little more character and personality to things. And if you see anything that looks out of sorts, you can chip away at it a little bit. You wouldn't want to go through the whole process like this, because once again you would have too many loose bits and random hairs floating throughout. So now I'm going to finish the top. I've got these wings on each side that sit at the parietal ridge. Once again, I'll take what's already been cut, what's already been established, and I'll start sliding through. By moving in this direction, it's naturally going to get longer in that direction. You can even just see from what I cut that we're on a tilt. Things are getting longer. But that's the flow of this haircut, is for things to gradually get longer towards the back. And now this side becomes a little more challenging because I can no longer stand on that side to make this happen. So I'm going to stand myself directly in front of her. And what I'm looking for now is a sense of balance, of whether or not the lengths are generally matching up side to side. Because this is setting the foundation for the rest of the haircut. We've got a little more length on this side, so I've got a little more work to do. All right, so where we're at in this moment is we've established what's coming forward, what's living through the top, how expansive it can get, and we're setting the foundation for what can happen through the sides. So we've got all of this length to play with down here. Now it's a matter of condensing it so that it follows what happens naturally with her hairline and it gets just a little bit longer towards the back. Now that we've established what's living through the top coming forward and starting to spill over into the sides, we need to determine what we're actually going to do with these side panels. We know that not everything is going to hit the same line front to back. Otherwise, that would be a bob with fringe. So to get our section, I'm going to take the pre-existing section of what we see as the distinction from what's living through the back versus what's living through the front. We're at a point right in the crown, and so I want to extend that point from the crown down to the mastoid. And this is in line with where the hairline starts to become vertical. The further I extend the section back this way, the more I take away from the length in the back, and the more I treat this area as it's an incorporation of the sides. Now the side panels have been isolated, and you can see the point from the crown that makes its way down to the mastoid. And that section pattern is mirrored on each side. Now, a stylistic choice that I need to make is whether or not we're creating almost a connection point from what we previously cut from the fringe, or whether we drop down a little bit of extra length that sits below it. And it begins to feel a bit like connecting the dots so that we create fluidity and something that mirrors what happens naturally with her hairline. My thought process for this is to actually establish where the length is situated on her and then fit the weight through the interior to line up with what's happening currently with the top. I'll take curved sections and that curved section will actually encourage something that gets longer and heavier towards the back. On each side, I can see where the length from the fringe is sitting. And now I need to establish a new line that extends towards the back. grabbing each curl individually to create a distinction, a separation in lengths. And now I'm checking the balance. Using your mirror in front of you can be really helpful. You'll always see things in the mirror that you didn't see when you were looking at it through various angles. And also play with the hair, move it around, see where it lives, see where it lands. By utilizing tension, it bevels the edge of your line. So if you were looking for a very sleek, flat line, you wouldn't want to really place much tension on it, because the more tension that we put on the hair, the more it springs upwards, which is why you're starting to see this roundness happen through the vertical dimension. And now I can take a look at what's living through the top, what's living sandwiched in between, and how I can potentially fit that through. On a human head of hair, you're going to see differences in consistency. Not only differences in curl pattern, but differences in density. It's our job to give her a sense of balance and flow with what we're working with. Now once again, we're coming through and we are connecting the dots. So I can see what I've cut through the top. I can see what's living underneath. If I want, I can lift a little bit of this and work towards it. So once again, returning to the mirror and really looking at what's happening. Are we creating within this vertical dimension a sense of flow? Have we established the length that she wants to see as it sits on her features? Continually moving the hair around. Ask her to shake her hair side to side. That way it loosens everything up and it lets things expand to where they are designed to live. By coming through with these vertical dimensions, it gives us more control over how lean this vertical dimension becomes. If I were to just simply take these horizontal sections, it would actually bubble out significantly more and you wouldn't see nearly as lean of that type of dimension. So this gives you that good indicator that we're on the right track. The shape is progressively getting longer towards the back. It's accentuating her eyes, her cheekbone, her jawline. There's all of these points of interest that are happening through the front. And she's really seeing her texture pop and expand in fun ways. From here, we simply need to join in the back. And we need to choose a length that works well for the natural progression of this shape. If we were to suddenly stop working and leave the back as is, well, here is your mullet. If someone wants to exaggerate and see all that extra length down there, it's a stylistic choice. There's obviously things that we could do to the interior to create a better sense of flow. We could potentially connect from the length that's situated here in the crown that's living forward, and we could extend that back this way. It would lean this out and it would actually let the curls expand a little more out here. This is the thing, gravity always wins. So where her hair is at right now, gravity's pulling this down and it's making it flick out at the ends. We want something that's a bit more form-fitting for her since we're going into that shag territory. So we know that we're going to cut a significant amount from back here, but what's important to me is to actually build her profile so that when people see her, they see this really nice shape top to bottom and front to back. As we've gone and made our way towards the back, I'm prioritizing where the length sits before I prioritize what's happening within the vertical dimension. The angle of my blade is actually going to encourage what direction it gets longer in. So if I want things to get longer and drop off towards the back, I'm going to work the angle of my blade in this way. Now that I'm working this side, I can turn my blade over and push that hair in the direction I want it to get longer. Coming through with the points of my scissors, softening the edge, creating separation. So the distinction for me in what I'm seeing is that this isn't your perfect rounded bob line. If this were your bob line, we would have used what we cut in the front and we would have notched this out and not left some of the excess hair at the bottom. I'm thinking softer, not as bold as a bob line. Now I'm going to take one more horizontal curved section to really firmly establish where that length is positioned. And I'm going to use the angle of my blade to encourage what I want to have happen vertically. I work from the corner towards the center, and then I will work from this corner to the center. Once again, have your client shake their head out. Move it all around as much as you can. The hair in the second section, it's not reaching the bottom. We're already starting to build the profile. And now I have the choice to try to meet up with this length that's in the crown. So it gives us a bit of an idea of what the length would need to be within this peak. And to make this process easier on us, we're going to take a vertical section. We're going to use what lives in the side panels as a reference. And we're going to work into the pre-existing length that we've established down through the bottom. By working from the front to the back, the natural flow is for things to get longer and heavier towards the back. That is without me even thinking about it. If I wanted it to be shorter in the back, I would start in the back and then I would work towards the front. Then the natural progression would be for things to actually get longer towards the front. So there's things like this that make haircutting so intriguing because body mechanics have a huge play in the overall outcomes and things that we don't necessarily always think about, but that are very reoccurring. And now that I've established that, I really need to take an honest look at what's happening to her profile, what needs to be focused on, dialed in. I can see a little bit of hair living through here that could be condensed. And now I can relatively measure out where this length that's living in the crown that's situated back, how that length actually compares to what's living through the front. And if you stretch them a little bit, you can see that they virtually line up really well, but that the way that her hair is positioned right now, we're getting this flat dynamic. So the more that we could actually play with this and move it around, the more we can encourage that sense of volume all the way through. This is where you need to have a little bit of reservation within the crown area, because people want to cut the hair and keep cutting to really see what they want to see, but you have to be considerate of what's symptomatic of people's hair within the crown area. The crown sees the elements. The sun comes down like a spotlight, and this is why a lot of people have trouble growing out the crown, and the crown will actually live a little more depressed and shrunken in. We want to encourage length to actually be able to play with, and so that it can expand and create that true sense of volume. The more we play with this, the more we break up that distinct split that we have, the more we're going to see volume happen all around. And once again, I would have her shake her head. I wouldn't do this to her. I would ask her to actually shake her hair. And then beyond shaking it, flip side to side, forward, backwards, every which way. And if you weren't going to go through the process of styling her, I would wet this area down right here and reset it and make it so there's not just a distinct line through there. Alright, well there you have it. I really hope you enjoyed my approach and process to the shag. This is on a really fun curly texture that expands and moves and is very playful and voluminous. And what I want you to see is that we placed an emphasis on a round shape, something that essentially copies what happens naturally with our hairline. We've got less hair through the front, it drops down into longer hair through the back, but we still wanted to build her profile and give her some natural volume and expansion and have it be this really seamless, flowy, layered haircut that she can basically just shake it out and have fun with it. So this is the shag for you.